Statistics New Zealand has released new information showing almost 1 in 4 New Zealanders were identified as being disabled last year. The findings show a 20% increase since a similar disability survey in 2001. Chris Ford of the Disabled Persons Assembly joins us to talk about the issues around disability in New Zealand. Good evening, Chris.
Good evening, Rebecca.
Do the figures released by Stats NZ surprise you?
No, not really. I know that we live in a community where there is a quite significant amount of impairment. These statistics don't surprise me in that respect at all. We now have 1.1 million New Zealanders who identify as having some form of impairment. Mine is visible, but many others have invisible impairments, such as those who live with the experience of mental illness.
Yes, I was just going to ask you, what kinds of things constitute a disability?
Well, Disabled Persons Assembly works to the social model of disability. The social model of disability holds that it is society which creates the barriers to our participation, and they may include, for example, through bad attitudes, negative attitudes, or in particular, poor access to information and the physical built environment. How
common is disability in our community?
It is quite common. As the Statistics New Zealand figures show, there are 52,000 people in Otago who identify as having some form of impairment. That's quite a significant amount of our population.
What are some of the difficulties that those people face here in Dunedin?
Well, for example, there are issues around access to employment, housing, health, education, indeed everyday life. These barriers have been put up to our participation, but they need to be removed in order that we have a better chance of being included in our communities.
So are things improving for the disabled?
To a certain extent they are. For example, there are now more public buildings and spaces which are accessible. As well as that, we have more younger people, younger disabled people that is, attending tertiary education and also mainstream school education. However, there still remain the barriers in terms of, for example, there are a high number of disabled people who live in inappropriate environments such as rest homes.
What more could be done to make life easier for those people then?
Well, for all disabled people, I think that it's about changing attitudes, building up supports, being able to lobby government to ensure that our needs are met, and also ensuring that all other societal stakeholders, such as the business community, for example, remove the barriers that exist to our participation in the community.
Are there still stereotypes about disability in this country?
Unfortunately, there are. For example, there can be, at one extreme, people can be very condescending, or on the other hand, they can think actually that we are people, that we are super crits, that we're able to leap tall buildings and be superhuman. Whereas the reality for disabled people like myself is that we have the same joys, the same sorrows, the same everyday reactions to things. But however, the difference is that we experience barriers to our inclusion.
What would you like to see happen around disability?
I'd like to see a society which goes from focusing on our impairments to one which includes us based on our abilities to do things, sees our abilities, and make sure that we are included, that the barriers are removed to our participation through ensuring access to employment, health, education and transport. That's what I'd like to see.
Chris Ford of the Disabled Persons Assembly, thank you so much for your time.
Most certainly. Thank you, Rebecca.